It really amazes me the fact that once the left realizes that they can't control free speech through legislation, as they are starting to come to the grips that they're not going to be able to, they've moved on and tried to force the issue and regulate and control free speech through political pressure. Such an incident came from the Florida gubernatorial races this past week. Now, I'm going to admit that I thought this was a wildly exaggerated story as it started out. I had been listening to it on various right leaning news sources for just about the entire time it's been a story. The Daily Wire was one of the first companies that I heard cover it, and all three of their hosts decided to talk about it. And then, of course, I heard it from other right leaning sources, YouTube videos, news articles, and etc. But it didn't really get to me and strike me as an important issue until I was listening to the other side and hearing what they had to say about it on Pod Save America.
So this guy goes on Fox News on Wednesday, and he said Floridians need to be careful not to, quote, monkey this up by electing Gillum, who he called, quote, an articulate spokesman for far left views and, quote, a charismatic candidate. Dan, what on earth did he mean by a phrase that turns up 0 Google hits except stories about this very incident? You don't see monkey this up used in any other conversations anywhere.
There's only one way to look at it. And even, put aside the members of the Republican Party who now view it as their job to say that racist things are not racist.
Yeah.
Most independent observers who look at this are pretty clear. I am as struck not by the term articulate as the use of the term monkey up.
Yeah.
Like, it is the classic. Chris Rock had an entire rant on this years ago about Colin Powell. He'd be like, he's so articulate. Well, what the fuck did you think? He's been the mayor of a city. He's a college graduate. People would say this about Obama all the time. Like, he is just so articulate and well-spoken. Well, you are making it clear that you are surprised that an African American can be well-spoken or can complete a sentence. That is the point you are making, and that to me, even more than the completely obviously patently racist use of the term monkey in this situation, exposes the racism that is at the heart of Ron DeSantis in so much, not just the Republican Party, but of society as we think about it. You hear this all the time in discussions of African Americans, whether they're African American politicians, business leaders, athletes. You hear, all you have to do is watch, sports for 2 minutes and I just met with such and such athlete. He's so articulate and smart, and it's like out of the shock dripping from their voice. Yeah. And it is very clear what is at play here. It's very clear what are the sentiments that drove Ron DeSantis' win. It's very clear the sentiments that drive Trumpism, and it's very fitting that he went on Fox, which basically has been building a case for white victimization for over a decade now. Was the place where this happened.
Now, I will admit full ignorance to the story up until just this point. I had heard people talk about the fact that Ron DeSantis had said these words, but I had never actually seen the video of where he said them himself. So I took some time today and I looked it up and tried to find the context of it. So let's take some time and look at what it was that Ron DeSantis actually said.
We've got to work hard to make sure that we continue Florida going in a good direction. Let's build off the success we've had on Governor Scott. The last thing we need to do is to monkey this up by trying to embrace a socialist agenda with huge tax increases and bankrupting the state.
Now, on any other news network or at any other time in human history, or pretty much in just any other general context of the situation, this would have been a complete non-starter. This wouldn't have even made the front page of a local Florida newspaper. I don't think this would have even made the back page of a local Florida newspaper. But unfortunately, this was probably one of the biggest stories of the week simply because Andrew Gillum is black and because the left media decided to take and focus on this one sentence in an entire campaign trail and go and run with it. Now, I will fully admit the fact that if I was running this exact same campaign against the same opponent in the same state and talking about it on the news after the fact, I would definitely be thinking a lot harder about what I said, and I probably would have used a completely different phrase. And I think that's a part of the problem, because I don't think that we should have to be thinking that hard about what we say in a country that has a First Amendment and guaranteed freedom of speech. And I think a big part of the fact that I would not use that phrase, in spite of the fact that it seems on its onset to be completely innocuous, is the fact that I've never used that phrase before. I've never even heard that phrase before. And that speaks to a little bit of what the guys on Pod Save America said. It was interesting to them, the fact, as they mentioned, that when you look back at this phrase, you tried to Google search the phrase monkey it up, and the only things that really came up were this particular story. I think pretty much everybody in the country as a whole knows right now that monkey is a slur for African American people. I don't know why it is that way. I have some theories about it, of course. But the reality of it is that it's an old slur, and it's one that's rarely even used anymore. I really have a hard time believing that a politician such as DeSantis would make the gaffe deliberately and outrightly to come out and call his opponent a monkey, especially if he was trying to appeal to a racist crowd, as though the people on Pod Save America and every other left-leaning source seem to feel that he is doing. I think there were a lot of other words that he could have used. Some of them, obviously, he couldn't say on national TV like that, but honestly, I almost think that he could have said muck it up on TV and it would have had the same effect. They would have been saying the exact same things. There are those on the right that believe that DeSantis just amalgamated two different phrases inadvertently without even thinking about it. He started talking about monkey around, which most everybody on the right was pretty quickly able to find an instance of Barack Obama saying, and mess it up or muck it up, whichever way that you want to. Unfortunately, I'm almost at the fear right now that had he said mess or muck, the left would have found some other way to pin this on him and blame it on him. It comes down to a point of political pressure and speech pressure and pressure to speak and act a certain way. The left is going out right now and trying to destroy Ron DeSantis' career because he inadvertently said something that was a racial slur at one point that is barely used in today's world anymore. Lastly, I want to take some time and look at a result that another less left-leaning commentator was able to find when he looked up monkey it up and tried to find out what it meant and what DeSantis might have meant when he said it. I really find this interesting because the two gentlemen that run Pod Save America are two former Obama staffers, and they claim that they do all the research and they go out and they present a completely unbiased podcast, even though they're probably one of the more biased ones I listen to. But last week, when the story was still fresh, Tim Pool went out, and I assume he did the same thing that the two guys from Pod Save America claim to have done. He went out, most likely, and Googled the phrase monkey it up. I'm sure this was when the story was a little bit fresher, so there may not have been as many news articles written about it. But he was pretty quickly able to find an instance in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology's handbook for programmers of the phrase being used in exchange with the phrase mess it up when talking about programming language. I don't necessarily believe that DeSantis went out and used MIT's glossary of technical terms as a thesaurus in order to make his speech. I do honestly think that it was just, as I mentioned, the amalgamation of two different phrases that were out there. But it is an interesting note to see that this phrase is in use and has been in use in the past. And another commenter that considers himself to be to the left was able to find it pretty quickly and do a fair analysis of the situation at hand that DeSantis finds himself in. I fully understand the fact that anybody who's in the public eye has got to hold himself to a much higher standard and watch what he says even more than anybody else, especially anybody that's going into politics. But there's so much hate out there, and there's so much anger and bitterness, there's so many racial slurs, and there are just so many slurs in general out there on the internet. I understand the fact that the internet is forever, and in this case so is cable TV. There's always going to be record out there of the fact that DeSantis said that. And I especially also understand the fact that anybody who has welcomed himself into the public eye and public life is held to a higher standard, and any of these things that are on the internet are going to be used against him anywhere in the future, especially if that person is on the right of politics. But with so much actual hate, racism, bigotry, racial slurs, and other problems that are out there on the internet, I would rather take some time and reserve my ire for people who are actually deserving of it, rather than somebody who said something inadvertent and having that turned on him into some sort of racial KKK slur. It seems much more productive to me to go out there and try and combat actual hate from people who actually hate other races, rather than going out and trying to destroy the career of somebody who inadvertently said something that could maybe stretchingly be construed as a racial slur in a way to avoid saying fuck it up on live cable TV. But that's just me. What do you think about what it was that DeSantis said, and what do you think about the reactions of it from the media? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.